Okay, so I did my report on the differences in traveling because I obviously planned two trips for social studies enrichment, and one of them was in the USA and the other one was a completely different country. So, um, just a little heads up before I start. There's so many differences in planning a trip in your own country and overseas. In this presentation, I will give you some examples of this. I planned a trip to Iceland and to Atlanta, Georgia, and I noticed that there were major differences in prices, hotels, and restaurants. So I'll be showing you some of those differences in this presentation. So for both of my projects, I had to do research on the flight costs for each of them. So the one on the left is for Iceland, and I flew economy and I flew on the same airline for both of these. Well, theoretically, I flew on the same airline for each of these trips, and I flew economy. But there was almost a $250 difference in the flight costs for each of them. And it was over 12 hours longer in flight time as well. And then my drive cost was the exact same because I drove from here to Colorado, and then the gas would be the same price. So the total travel cost, I don't remember what it was for Atlanta because I didn't put that in on that slideshow, but it was somewhere close to $300. But for Iceland, it was $500. So that's a pretty major difference. Okay, you can go to the next slide. The maps. So I had to find a map of both places, and there was, for Iceland, it gave me a map of Iceland, but it also gave me little tick marks for each of the places that I would visit on the country tour. Because I wasn't just going to Iceland, it was a country tour, so it was all scheduled and on an itinerary. Rather than when I went to Atlanta, Georgia, where I had all the free time to myself and I could choose where and when I wanted to go. So on the Atlanta, Georgia map, it's a little messed up because the blue dot, that represents downtown Atlanta, which is where all of the attractions that I would go to would be, rather than the Iceland one, where everything was all spread out and around the edge of the map. You can go to the next slide. The accommodations. So this is the Hyatt Regency Atlanta, which is where I would have stayed in Atlanta, Georgia. And it was only that one hotel in Atlanta rather than my Iceland trip because it was a country tour. So there was different hotels for each of the places that I would visit, different prices, and everything was covered in the overall price of the country tour. So I tried to narrow it down as much as I could, but it was difficult because I couldn't find just one hotel because it was all planned out already. So I think the Iceland trip was a better deal than my Atlanta trip because it was more put together and it was only, I think, $1,200 for everything, all around Iceland tour. And then I had to add on my flight prices, of course, because that was completely separate. But all my accommodations, restaurants, places, attractions, it was all covered in that country tour. While Atlanta, Georgia, it was completely separated. I had to pay for each of the attractions separately, and my hotel was more expensive there than all of my hotels that were in the country tour, which was surprising to me because there was like 8 hotels in my Iceland trip and there was only one in my Atlanta. So we'll go to the next slide. In conclusion, planning a trip out of the country can be way different than planning a trip in your own country because of prices, accommodations, and restaurants. And so I think that's about it.
History of Italy by Jacob Mazer. Presentation main points: intro on history, geography, economy, engineering, and sports. I love the places that have an incredible history. I love the Italian way of life. I love the food. I love the people. I love the attitudes of Italian. By Elton John. The Italian peninsula was a place that was booming with lots of prehistoric tribes. During the 8th century, they split into two dominant cultures. A common myth people believe is Romulus and Remus came along, and after lots of jealousy, Romulus killed Remus and named the city after himself, Rome. The Roman Empire used to be one of the most powerful civilizations in the world. In AD 117, the Roman Empire conquered most of the Middle East. The history of Rome covers the modern era and the Middle Ages. Rome was founded as a kingdom in 753 BC, but it later became a republic in 509 BC. Family is an extremely important part of their culture. In Italy, they have family gatherings often. They enjoy spending time with their family. Italy also takes pride in its buildings and architecture. For example, they are known for a few things such as the Colosseum, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, the Pantheon, and the Trevi Fountain. Geography and climate. Italy's location is right off the coast of France and Switzerland. Many people call it the Bhutan Rock, which is Italy and the island of Sicily. The peninsula-shaped land is how it won most of its sea battles, including the famous Punic Wars. They have the Mediterranean climate, dry summers and wet, mild winters. Italy covers 2.2 million square miles. Italy is located right here on the map. Economy. Ancient Rome's economy was very simple. It was a slave-based economy. Some crops grown are grains, grapes, tomatoes, oranges, potatoes, apples, barley, rice, and corn. The Romans made their own roads to trade easier by land. Their roads were made of concrete, which included limestone and volcanic ash. The Roman roads covered 50,000 miles. They also traded by sea. Engineering. The engineering of Italy was very precise. At one time, they had the most advanced city in the world, Rome. They developed aqueducts, and the aqueducts had to keep a steady 2-degree slope so it wouldn't go too fast or too slow. They also developed concrete, which helped them create stronger, more stable buildings. The Italians found out that they could use arches to open up things without using pillars. Arches were designed to distribute weight across the structure. Sports. The ancient Romans played a large variety of sports. They also took sports from ancient Greece and changed them up. Sports were for the wealthy people. Their sports consisted of chariot racing, gladiator fighting, Roman boxing, hoop rolling, and the Roman ball game, and indoor Roman games. If you go to Italy today, some of the sports you'll see is football, also known as soccer, basketball, rugby union, cycling, water polo, and volleyball. Athletics Calcio Florentine is an early form of football game. Games are played annually in the Plaza Santa Croce in Florence. Palla is an Italian word for ball. It is a traditional street game played in the villages of Italy. Hitball is a team sport from Italy, in which players strike the volleyball-sized ball into the opponent's goal only using their upper limbs. Based on this information, would you like to go to Italy? History of Italy report. The Italian peninsula was a place that was booming with lots of prehistoric tribes. During the 8th century, they split into two dominant cultures. A common myth believed is Romulus and Remus came along, and Romulus killed Remus after tons of jealousy, and named the city after himself, Rome. Ancient Rome was one of the most powerful economies in the world during AD 117. It all started when people started to attack the city, and Rome just kept defending and winning. Eventually, they conquered most of the Middle East. Rome's history spans 28 centuries. Italy covers 2.2 million square miles. Family is an extremely important part of their everyday life and culture. In Italy, they have family gatherings often. Italy takes pride in its architecture and buildings, such as the Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore, the Colosseum, Cinque Terre, St. Mark's Basilica, and St. Mark's Basilica. Italy has a peninsula-shaped body right off the coast of France and Switzerland. It's surrounded by seas. Many people call it the Bhutan Rock. Its peninsula-shaped body makes it easier to defend against attacks, and they can see the ships coming in from a distance. Another thing that factored in was their Mediterranean climate. Ancient Rome's economy was a very simple slave-based economy. They produced many things such as grapes, grains, tomatoes, oranges, potatoes, apples, barley, rice, and corn. The Romans figured out a way to trade easier by land. Their solution was to make roads. The roads were made out of concrete. The roads covered a total of 50,000 miles. The roads were made out of concrete, which included volcanic ash and limestone. They went all throughout the Roman Empire. Engineering in Italy was very precise. They had one of the most advanced cities in the world, Rome. The Italians developed aqueducts to bring water from the mountains to Rome. These aqueducts kept a steady 2-degree slope so the water wouldn't come in too fast or too slow. They also developed concrete, which helped them create stronger, more stable buildings. The Italians found out that they could use something other than pillars to create vast open buildings. Their solution was arches. Arches were designed to distribute weight across the structure. The Italians got a lot of their ideas from the Greeks, such as their sports. Sports in Italy were for the wealthy people. Some of their sports include famous chariot racing and gladiator fighting. Some of their sports consisted of Roman boxing, hoop rolling, Roman bulking, and indoor Roman games. In Italy, sports that are played today consist of football or soccer, basketball, rugby union, cycling, water polo, and volleyball. Athletics Calcio Florentine is an early form of football. Games are played annually at the Plaza Santa Croce in Florence. Palla is a traditional Italian word for ball, and a street game played in the villages of Italy. The hitball is an indoor team sport from the Italians, which the players strike the volleyball-sized ball into the opponent's goalpost using just their upper limbs. Gladiator fighting took place in the Colosseum. The Colosseum took 8 years to build. Some of the slaves went to the Colosseum to get out of slavery. If they won, they were freed. In fact, some of the Colosseums still exist today, and you can go see it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Allie Bear, and my presentation was on the history of wigs. Wigs were started in Egyptian times, and they were made out of human hair, animal hair, or fibers from plants. Both females and males wore wigs, but wigs were a big sign of social status. Then we head on to Roman and Greek wigs. These wigs were made out of human or animal hair, or sometimes the hair of famous conquerors. More women than men wore wigs, but still, men and women wore wigs at that time. Hair was considered very sacred in ancient Roman times. And now we're heading on to medieval wigs. These wigs were typically made from wool, horsehair, yak hair, buffalo hair, or feathers. Typically, men wore the wigs because during this time they were intended for men, but ever so often you would see a woman wearing a wig. During this time, churches said that women must cover their heads when entering the church, which was pointless to wear a wig then. So that led to a small decline in the wearing of wigs. In the 17th century, wigs were made of human, horse, and goat hair. It was more common for men to wear wigs during this time, but women still wore them. Churches wouldn't let you in their church if you were wearing a wig, and it was very much ridiculed to wear wigs, but yet it didn't lessen the wearing of wigs. In the 18th century, these wigs were made of human hair or the cheap kind of horse hair and goat hair. Men and women wore wigs during this time. Women wore big, elaborate hairstyles with many decorations, and men wore perukes, otherwise known as a periwig. Periwigs are powdered wigs. There was a small period of time that wigs had died out because of the flour shortage in the previous century. But after that, the popularity of wigs lasted the entire 18th century. In the 19th century, these wigs were typically made of human hair, but sometimes horse and goat. This is the time period when big, elaborate wigs started dying out. So unless you were an old woman who lost her hair, you typically didn't wear a wig. During this time period, the wearing of big, elaborate wigs really died out, and the wearing of wigs for social status also died out. In the 20th century, they are made of human hair, animal hair, and synthetic fibers. People didn't really wear wigs during this time period for a while, but if you did, you were typically a woman, for men didn't really wear wigs during this time. In 1950, there was a time period where wigs fell out of favor, but then machine washable nylon acrylic wigs came out and the amount of wig wearing increased. Now this is currently. Current wigs are made of human hair, animal hair, or synthetic fibers. Both men and women wear wigs, even though it is more common in women. We have come so far from Egyptian times, and periwigs have very much died out, for we have the ability to wash our hair and wigs. We also have the tools to get rid of lice. For example, Marie Antoinette, she wore wigs. She actually wore a powdered wig, which is called a periwig. Did you know that Marie's hairdresser was so important that he could only dress her hair once a week? Marie Antoinette was very famous for wearing the pouf, which her hairdresser had pretty much created. Marie Antoinette would wear figurines, buttons, and even gems in her hair. Due to so much vigorous styling, stress, and depression, Marie Antoinette's hair started to thin and maybe fall out in 1776. The pouf was not Marie Antoinette's only hairstyle. She also wore something called a coiffure. Marie Antoinette had nervous habits to run her hands through her hair, which also caused some hair thinning. And Marie Antoinette started noticing gray hairs on her head in her 30s. And John Adams, he also wore a wig during this time. He wore a periwig also, which is a powdered wig. John Adams wore wigs for fashion and for hygiene. John Adams sometimes decided things against his cabinet by dashing and trampling his wig on the floor. John Adams really helped the style of periwigs, for he was a president. John Adams' wig was fairly clean because he was an important person, but still, his wig was disgusting. This is just, I made some how to wash your wigs. We don't have to read it. These are some examples from wigs. I don't even know how old they are. They're really old. And I think they're made from synthetic fibers because they don't feel real. But these are just some examples.
Go. History of Mathematics by Harrison Mazer. Beginning of mathematics began 6th century BC by the Pythagoreans. First counting system was notches in ancient man bones. Term mathematics comes from ancient Greek mathema, meaning subject of instruction. Mathematics may be defined as the study of relationships among quantities, magnitudes, and properties, and also of the logical operations by which unknown quantities, magnitudes, and properties may be deduced, or the study of quantity, structure, space, and change. Facts about pi. The symbol of pi was created by the British mathematician William Jones in 1706 to represent the ratio. Since the exact value of pi is unknown, it is impossible to find an accurate measurement of circumference or area of the circle. Pi may be defined as 3.14159265. The most digits of pi ever recited was by Fabrice Bellard, who recited 2.7 trillion digits. Mathematics effect on today. The CT scan, data storage in cell phones, and equalizers in the music industry are all made possible by the mathematical achievements of the French Joseph Fourier in the early 19th century. Fun facts. The number 7 is arithmetically unique. It is the only single-digit number you can't multiply or divide while keeping the answer in the 1 through 10 number group. Multiplying ones always gives you palindromes, such as 11 times 11, which is 121. Cicadas rely on prime numbers to survive. They only come out of the ground after a prime number of years to avoid predators with more rounded lifestyles. 40 is the only number that is spelt with letters arranged in alphabetical order. From 0 to 1000, 1000 is the only number that has letter A in 1000. Mathematics of ancient structures. Mathematics and the pyramids of Giza. The theory of the Great Pyramid of Giza is based on the application of a gradient of 5.5 secants. This measurement means that for the pyramid height of 1 cubit, which is 7 palms, there would be a base of 5.5 palms. The ratio of height to base is then 7 divided by 5.5, which is 1.2727. Ancient Egyptians used simple mathematics to build the Great Pyramids, such as trigonometry, Pythagorean theorem, and simple algebra. They also measured the angle of each direction so that each side of the pyramid was facing north, south, east, and west. The pyramids are only 67 thousandths of a degree counterclockwise from perfect cardinal alignment. Different number systems around the world. The most commonly used number system in the world is the Hindu-Arabic number system. The simplest number system in the world is the unary number system. Most complicated math problems in the world, the collapse conjecture. Goldbach's conjecture, a statement that shows every even number greater than 2 is the sum of 2 prime numbers. The twin prime conjecture. If there are infinitely many prime numbers, are there infinitely many twin primes? A twin prime is two prime numbers that have a difference of 2. The twin prime conjecture says yes. However, the closest humanity has ever come to solving this problem is finding an infinite number of primes with a difference of 6. What is the deal with pi plus e? All rational numbers and roots of rational numbers are algebraic. The opposite of algebraic is transcendental. Pi and e are both transcendental, but still it is unknown if pi plus e is algebraic or transcendental. Just like no one knows about pi times e or pi divided by e or other simple combinations between the two. Is y rational? Y is a Euler-Mascheroni constant, which is a lowercase Greek gamma. Y is a real number, approximately valued at 0.5772. Y is the combination of two very well understood mathematical objects, but still it remains unsolved. Y has been calculated to 500 billion digits, and yet no one can prove if it is rational or not. Can you solve these problems? Mathematics Report by Harrison Mazer. Many of us may know mathematics as 2 plus 3 equals 5 or 10 minus 3, 7 equals 3, but most people don't really know the history behind mathematics. Mathematics is a study of relationships among quantities, magnitudes, and properties, and also of the logical operations by which unknown quantities, magnitudes, and properties may be deduced. Mathematics can also be defined as the study of quantity, structure, space, and change. There is much more to mathematics than what meets the eye. The CT scan, data storage in cell phones, and equalizers in the music industry would not be around today if it were not for the mathematical achievements of the French Joseph Fourier in the early 19th century. Mathematics has been around since the 6th century BC. Many ancient buildings use mathematics, such as the Great Pyramids of Giza. It may seem like the pyramids were built using complicated mathematics, but they were actually built using just simple Pythagorean theorem, trigonometry, and algebra. The ancient Egyptians also used measurements to line up each face with the cardinal direction. Although the ancient Egyptians were highly intelligent, they were not perfect. The faces are not exactly lined up with each cardinal direction. They are only 67 thousandths of a degree away from perfect cardinal alignment. The most common number system in the world is the Hindu-Arabic number system. However, this is not the simplest number system in the world. The unary number system is. Many of us know the great mathematicians such as Archimedes, Isaac Newton, Albert Einstein, Euclid, and Pythagoras. However, these people cannot even top the 10 hardest math problems. These problems consist of things like pi plus e is y and is y rational. If there's infinite many primes, are there infinite many twin primes? In conclusion, mathematics has a huge effect on our daily lives, whether we realize it or not. Everyone will use mathematics at one time or another. Many jobs such as a nurse or a cashier will use math. in their daily lives. Even chefs use math. You do not have to solve the hardest problems in the world to be good at math. Very few people have the skills and knowledge of Archimedes, but it is still great to try and solve some math problems every once in a while. Do you think you can solve the 10 hardest math problems in the world?